Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a documented case that honestly starts off as a classic supernatural chiller, but abruptly twists into a harrowing psychological crime. We're looking at the terrifying events that unfolded at St. Mary's Sacred Heart Church. And let me tell you, what begins as your standard tale of demonic possession quickly spirals into a devastating revelation about human nature. But right before we get into the timeline, we've got to ask ourselves a crucial question to set the stage here. What happens when the greatest evil hides inside the holiest of places? Just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this, because the answer is going to completely flip everything you think you know about this case. Part 1. The unsettling new arrival. Okay, so we begin at St. Mary's Sacred Heart Church in Calcutta. This place doubled as a hostel for young women dedicating their lives to training as nuns, leaving all worldly pleasures behind. It was late March, right during evening prayers, when a 22-year-old named Maria arrived to begin her training. Now, the head of the center, Mother Superior Agnes, introduced Maria to everyone as God's special child, someone meant to serve at the feet of the Lord. But here's the thing. The expectation of this devoted, peaceful young woman clashed violently with reality. Maria was entirely silent. Her face was just this unmoving mask of deep depression. She didn't make eye contact, didn't show a single emotion, and walked straight to her room without a word. Her roommates instantly felt this unnatural, deeply unsettling aura around her. Part 2. Symptoms of the demonic. Well, that unsettling feeling quickly mutated into sheer terror. Maria's roommates, especially a girl named Roma, realized this wasn't just sadness. Something deeply unnatural was taking hold inside those church walls. Roma actually witnessed a rapid escalation of these terrifying symptoms. Like during morning prayers, Maria would stand at the back, mumbling just to avoid the prayer. But it wasn't her voice. Roma heard her speaking in this dual, harsh male voice that just sent shivers down her spine. And then later that night, Roma peeked into Maria's room. She found her sitting in a chair, but her limbs were unnaturally braided and twisted backward, literally like a discarded rubber doll. And when Maria snapped her neck around to look at Roma, she had these deep, dark, sunken rings around her eyes, and her teeth were black as burning coal. It was a sight so horrific that Roma actually collapsed on the spot. Hearing those screams, Mother Superior Agnes rushed to the room. Grasping a holy cross, she approached Maria. But when the cross slipped from Agnes's hand and hit the floor, Maria's pupils instantly turned pitch black. Her fingers cracked backward, and she launched a vicious, animalistic attack. She leapt from her chair like a wild beast and literally bit a chunk of flesh right off Mother Agnes's hand, just standing there chewing it. Part 3. The temporary fix. Realizing instantly that this was way beyond a medical issue or a mental breakdown, the church staff attempted an immediate spiritual intervention to contain whatever had taken hold of this young woman. Father Steve, the resident priest, locked Maria in her room and came back the next morning with the other nuns to perform prayers. As he approached Maria, who was cowering in the corner, covering her ears to block out the prayers, he splashed her with holy water. And this is where it gets incredibly visceral. The holy water reacted exactly like acid. Wherever the droplets touched Maria's skin, severe burn blisters formed instantly. With a final agonizing scream, she collapsed. The entity had seemingly retreated. Now, this created a brief, false sense of hope. In the immediate post-holy water phase, Maria was severely weakened but seemed totally normal. After starving for 2 days in a catatonic state, she finally asked for water and began eating ravenously, stuffing food into her mouth almost like an animal. But then came the relapse. Suddenly, her eyes shifted again, and she started babbling simultaneously in multiple unknown languages. Mother Agnes knew Maria grew up in an orphanage and couldn't possibly know these languages. So the demonic entity was back, and it was stronger than before. Part 4. The exorcism begins. Knowing they were completely out of their depth, the church leadership called in Father Edmund for a formal, high-level exorcism late on a Friday night. Let's walk through his methodical preparations. Step 1. They tied Maria securely to a wooden chair so she couldn't attack. Step 2. They surrounded her with heavy crosses and lit candles to create a holy barrier. Step 3 involved the continuous sprinkling of holy water. And finally, Step 4, Father Edmund began reciting the sacred exorcism verses to cast the demon back to hell. However, the holy rites didn't bind the demon at all. Actually, scratch that, they completely provoked it, leading to a catastrophic failure. First, Maria began smiling this sinister, demonic smile. Then, as Father Edmund's chants grew louder, Maria screamed, and every single candle in the room blew out simultaneously. The sheer supernatural force actually caused the stone ground beneath the Holy Cross to physically crack open, and terrifyingly, Maria began to taunt the priests, with her voice violently snapping back and forth between the crying sounds of a small infant and the harsh, booming voice of a grown man. Right at the absolute peak of the exorcism, with the ground cracking and the candles extinguished, the narrative violently pivots. We're forced to ask the most important question of this entire story. Why Maria? Out of everyone, why was this specific, young, supposedly innocent girl targeted by such overwhelming dark forces? Part 5. A sinister secret revealed. So right as the chaos peaked, Mother Agnes, who was standing nearby, fell entirely under the demon's control. Her own eyes turned deep black, and under the crushing weight of the entity, she was forced to scream out a horrifying confession. It revealed a tragic, sickening truth. 1 year prior, Maria never even wanted to be a nun. She was a joyful girl who sang at the city church. And there, she caught the eye of Father Neil, and they had a secret illicit affair. Fast forward 4 months, Maria discovers she's pregnant. She begged to keep the child, but Father Neil, absolutely terrified of ruining his pristine reputation, conspired with Mother Agnes. On a stormy night, Neil and Agnes tricked Maria, giving her drugs to force a premature delivery. And here is the final, most horrific revelation. The baby was born alive. But while Maria lay bleeding and helpless, Father Neil and Mother Agnes took that living, breathing infant out to the church graveyard, dug a hole, and buried the baby alive to cover up their sin. This unthinkable crime explains exactly why the possession occurred in the first place. It wasn't random, not at all. Maria had been driven mad with extreme guilt and betrayal. Every single night, she had been going to that graveyard, screaming and crying for her murdered baby. Her bottomless grief, her anger, and her proximity to the unholy burial site essentially acted like a beacon. She invited demonic forces in, spearheaded by the vengeful spirit of her own murdered infant. Part 6. The Final Vengeance. You see, the possessing spirit wasn't there to hurt Maria. It was there for justice. It demanded the presence of the ultimate culprit, the architect of this tragedy, Father Neil. In a horrific display of power just to force their hand, Maria screamed and violently snapped her own arm backward. The bone fractured with a sickening crack. Mother Agnes, still possessed, commanded them to call Father Neil. And the terrified clergy, realizing the demon was going to rip Maria apart from the inside out if they didn't comply, immediately summoned Father Neil from the city church to the exorcism room. As soon as Father Neil walked into the room, he tried to hide behind Mother Agnes, literally trembling. Maria stared right at him and levied this chilling, definitive sentence. One father, one punishment. It's a haunting condemnation of his hypocrisy, right? He was a father of the church, yet he murdered his own child to protect his status. And now, the time for his punishment had arrived. The supernatural vengeance was swift and absolutely brutal. Maria lifted her head, and instantly, Father Neil and Mother Agnes began to levitate high into the air. The extinguished candles suddenly flared back to life, and 2 of them flew straight into Neil and Agnes, setting their clothes completely ablaze. Father Edmund frantically tried to throw holy water on them, but the water just slipped uselessly from his trembling hands. They were suspended high in the air, completely beyond saving, burning alive as the spirit finally exacted its revenge. When we look at the aftermath, we see a dark but fitting conclusion. The fate of the guilty? Well, Father Neil and Mother Agnes burned to death right there in that room. The scandal and trauma caused both the City Holy Church and Sacred Heart Church to be permanently closed down. But the fate of the victim? The exact moment Neil and Agnes died, Maria's head slumped forward. The spirit left her. She survived, was taken to the hospital, and physically recovered, entirely freed from the possession that had gripped her. Which leaves us with this haunting final thought. When those sworn to protect commit the ultimate sin, who is the real monster? We started this explainer looking at a terrifying demonic possession, but in the end, the darkest evil wasn't supernatural at all. It was the greed, the pride, and the murderous betrayal committed by human beings hiding behind a cloak of holiness. It's a sobering reminder that sometimes the true horrors aren't hiding in the shadows. They're standing right in front of us. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. See you on the next explainer.